From Iraq, the land where scriptural legend placed the Garden of Eden, our route lies across the northern tip of the Persian Gulf and over the Persian mountains to Shiraz and mighty Persepolis, one-time residence of the Persian emperors. Southward from Baghdad looms a great ruin resembling an abandoned Zeppelin hangar. It is the famous Arch of Ctesiphon, dating from early Christian times, a marvelous example of human ingenuity which has puzzled engineers throughout the world. With its span of 84 feet and height of over 100, it has weathered the storms of nearly 2,000 years. More than 500 miles southeastward, we begin to climb to an altitude of 12,000 feet until we glide at last across the tumbled desolation of the Persian mountains. They stand like a mighty barrier flung down by angry nature as a bulwark to protect the great plateau where Cyrus and Darius trained the armies with which they conquered the ancient world. Persia lies spread below us like some sleeping giant whose sudden stirring might send us like an insect spinning to destruction among these barren peaks and desolate shadow-filled gorges. The altimeter now reads 14,000 feet, and the even drone of our motors is music to us. At last, the modern city of Shiraz appears on the plateau. One can barely discern formal gardens with quiet pools and tall cypresses. It reminds one of delicate Persian miniatures and of Omar Khayyam. At Persepolis, a silver speck appears between the columns of the audience hall where Persian emperors used to sit in royal state. Overhead, our plane sweeps past this capital of the fourth and last ancient Oriental Empire. What would Darius the Great have said at such a sight? For us, at a height of 1,000 feet, the Great Terrace presents a grand array of palaces and halls of state. The Oriental Institute's Persian expedition has restored as its headquarters that large building in the upper background, which was the harem palace of Darius and Xerxes. Alexander the Great, who in 331 B.C. conquered Persia and burned Persepolis, would have marveled at the sight of our plane coming in over the very ground upon which his Macedonian veterans must have camped more than 2,200 years ago. The tremendous scale on which this Versailles of the ancient world was planned and built was in keeping with the vision of its builders as they dreamed of greater empires. Some of the blocks in this 50-foot terrace wall weigh over 40 tons and are taller than the native Persian on his donkey jogging along a road that emperors traveled. From this imposing stronghold, those same emperors watched their troops proudly passing in review upon the plain beneath. Persia's subject nations never supposed these mighty walls would long outlive the greatest empire the ancient world had yet beheld. Whoever climbed the grand staircase to seek admission at the gate of Xerxes had need of flawless credentials, for they were inspected by the picked troops who guarded the palaces a regiment called the Immortals, famous in the annals of Persian conquest. The columns are all that remains of their guard room, which was attached to the gate. The road running north from the Persian Gulf comes straight as an arrow toward Persepolis, across the plain, over a mile above sea level. Those far-off mountains rise almost as high again. Imagine this terrace when the halls and palaces were in their glory. After restoration of the harem palace of Darius had been half completed by the Oriental Institute, the building looked like this. The windows and doors of all Persepolis buildings were of stone, but the main body of the walls was of massive adobe. When Alexander came marching from the ancient west and destroyed Persepolis, this 6-ton lintel block came crashing down with roofs and walls. Now, after more than 2,000 years, the peaceful forces of modern science from the New West are hoisting it back into place again. The energetic gentlemen of the chorus who are pulling at the ropes in Gilbert and Sullivan style have only the vaguest idea of what is going on. But they get regular pay for it, so they haul away with such goodwill as Allah has given them. Gradually the block is brought to the right level and at last settles almost into its appointed place. A jimmy will do the rest. A season's work has effected a great change in this building. The adobe walls have been rebuilt, wooden columns like those in the original structure have been re-erected in the entrance courts, and the whole place has been roofed over. 2,400 years ago, when Darius the Great provided this palace for his charming favorites, his carpenters used the same type of saw which these workmen are employing today. The expedition's chickens are wandering about in what was the main hall of the palace of Xerxes. How are the mighty fallen! Chickens originally reached Persia in the days of Persepolis, brought in by commerce from India and the Far East. The Persians imported them into the Mediterranean world. These splendid carvings on the north staircase to the audience hall of Darius, depicting a procession of tribute bearers, were not thoroughly buried by Alexander's destruction. Despite centuries of exposure, even the needles are discernible in the carving of a cedar from the forests once covering the Persian mountains. Camel bells from caravans of beasts like this still break the brooding silence of Persepolis. Similar sculptures were almost certain to be found beneath the grassy mounds overlying most of the terrace. But no one dreamed of the regal splendors which their excavation would reveal to the world. For more than 22 centuries, the capital of the Persian Empire lay neglected. Then in 1931, the Oriental Institute received the concession to excavate and restore Persepolis. After restoring the harem palace, the expedition began excavating the royal audience hall of Darius the Great. A great trench was dug in the area between the cluster of columns and the ruins just below us, where there was suspected